This is Scorched Vine, a Vin Noir's production of Hope's Nocturne, written by OPL Noir, performed by Carrie Storm, Chapter 2, Part 2, New Friends. That smells really good, a husky voice said from somewhere behind her. Amanda jumped, slapping her hand over her mouth before she screamed and blew her cover. She turned, then froze to the spot. A tall, lanky boy stared at her as if she had an extra head. Being frozen seemed an odd reaction for her, considering she'd never had a single good use for males. Well, other than Dad, she frowned and shrugged, but continued staring. His eyes were the deepest, most crystal clear gray she'd ever seen. They were surrounded by thick lines of dark lashes, which could easily be mistaken for eyeliner. They were positively beautiful, if anyone can say that about a boy. He was the color of dark honey, with a head full of unruly, tight and loose dark curls. I wish my curls were that dark, she breathed, then frowned. I wish I hadn't said that out loud. He smirked, apparently not as impressed with her admission. She quickly recovered. Shushing him as if she hadn't just spent time ogling him, she turned her attention back to the goings-on in the living room. Why are we being quiet? The skinny boy asked. This is my daughter, Anna, Amanda heard her mother declare from somewhere in the middle of a group of suits. Crap, she hissed. Don't start with the introductions. This was supposed to be a simple drop-and-run mission, she whispered over her shoulder. If she starts with the introductions, I'm going to need a full-on extraction plan. What are you talking about? He said, from a little closer behind her. When she didn't answer, he asked, Why are we whispering? He spoke slower, as if she couldn't understand English. And do you always squeak when you talk? The as yet unidentified annoyance refused to be ignored. Amanda turned and placed him in her crosshairs, using as close to an approximation of her mother's stare as she could muster. She drew in an exacerbated breath. If you don't mind, I'm trying to stay under the radar while looking for someone, she hissed. Why are you staying under the radar? Who are you hiding from? The annoyance asked, rather loudly. Everyone! She glared up at him. They were almost nose to chest now. Where has this boy been living? Under a rock? Amanda clenched her fists. Everyone over the age of 5 knows that Miss Sabine mangles cheeks as a given. It's the price of admission. Okay, maybe I can help, he said, and had the nerve to sound tired, as if he wasn't giving away her position. Who are the suits commiserating over by the table? Amanda asked, jotting her chin towards a group of dark suits huddled by the dining room table. They're representatives from Caspian Shipping, with the head of the Maritime Guild. The annoyance answered, growling as he glared at them. My uncle called them a cutthroat bunch of sycophants, worse than schoolfish cuddling up to a barracuda. The gray suit at the center of them is Joachim Ma. They all trip over themselves to be close to him, even though he's taken over most of their ships and owns half the dock slips at the port here in Ontum and in Canacal. He glared at the cohorts, sipping their drinks as they stole furtive glances at the grieving woman and her granddaughter. I once overheard my uncle say that he's not the one pulling the strings. He said that regardless of how Ma may posture, someone else is pulling his strings. Your uncle doesn't like them? She asked. Not really. He shook his head, never taking his eyes off the bunch. The gray suit denied him, a seal some years ago. Thought he looked familiar. She swirled and pointed at a bunch surrounding her mother and asked, What about them? Mercantile Guild lackeys, he said, his pitch dropping even lower. Nothing moves into or out of the country without them approving it, and I do mean nothing. Slick in the pinstripe suit, standing off by himself, handles everything from oil to pharmaceuticals, and not always the good kind. What other kind is there? She wanted to ask, but frowned at him. And the bunch moving towards Miss Sabine? She asked. He made a sound approximating between a hiss and a growl. Surprised by the level of disgust laced within that sound, Amanda spun. Why the anger? She wondered, questioning her assumption that he wasn't aroused relative. No way. He looks nothing like Miss Sabine. Did they all know the departed? She asked, her whisper tremulous in the face of his intense gray glare and proximity, noticing for the first time his woodsy soap and clean boy scent. Clean boy, she smirked. That must be an oxymoron. No, they're all a bunch of vultures, here sharpening their knives to pick at what's left over. He focused his glare on a new bunch of suits entering from the front door. Now that she's gone, they're expecting the vineyard to go belly up, and they're all vying for what's left. He glanced down at her. Who are you looking for? And why are you whispering? I'm whispering because I'd prefer to go unnoticed. I'm here against my will, compelled to help Miss Sabine and her. She raised her hands, making quotation marks in the air with her fingers. Destitute, indigent, orphan child, Amanda explained as she glanced toward the living room and the girl sitting next to Miss Sabine. And I need to find a French Casanova who lost his wife. Now shh, if you don't mind, I'd like to escape the premises with my cheeks, hair, and ribs intact. The annoying boy scowled at her. He's not here. Bummer! She slumped, then perked up with an idea. Do you know him? Maybe annoyance could be useful after all. She decided that was a fitting name for him. Yes, he's my father. He tilted his head, his pitch deepening. Destitute, indigent grandchild. Annoyance asked. His fathomless gray eyes bored a hole into hers. During their minute-long standoff, she briefly wondered about his name. She'd never seen him before and wondered how much he visited his grandmother. In the space of a heartbeat, the gray-eyed grandson turned and walked off. He left Amanda bereft of her wits. She wondered how hard it would be to execute a quick retreat out the back door. She would write in her apologies. 1 minute, she'd been paralyzed by those gray eyes. The next, she'd been shoving both feet into her mouth, scowling at his dark curls as he walked into the living room. He could have introduced himself. You know, something like, "Hi, I'm one of the bereaved." That way, I didn't speak like an idiot and act like my mother. Gran. He glanced over his shoulder. I took the garbage outside. By the way, you have another visitor in the kitchen. He yelled over the din in the living room. Snitch, she hissed. And he's thrown down the gauntlet. Compromised by my ignorance and a gray-eyed informant, she grimaced. Well, challenge accepted. That would be Amanda, her mother sang, dripping smoothness. Honey, come out here and say hello to Marie. Amanda skulked out of the kitchen, preparing for the attack. Walking past Anna and a number of neighborhood girls, like magnets, gravitating towards one another, unable to be separated, she heard their giggles. The word milk hummed like a wave throughout the crowd as she passed. They were reminding her of her place. The one the milkman didn't have to knock twice for. She marched through the crucible of whispers and cigarette ashes being flung her way. This wasn't her first gathering. She drifted toward the woman who, for all her good intentions, would only increase her humiliation. Under their glare again, she sighed. There's my little one, Miss Sabine crooned. Come and meet my granddaughter. Miss Sabine's arms were outstretched, her hands grasping at thin air like giant pincers. Amanda knew they were preparing to shred her cheeks to bits. She clenched her arms and the muscles at her sides in an attempt to ensure she would be able to breathe while being crushed to death. Trudging her way to the human vice grip, she closed her eyes, expecting thumbs and fingers to seize both cheeks. She hoped if she couldn't see them, maybe she wouldn't feel the squeeze. A cloud of liniment overwhelmed her every sense, making her cough just before the constrictors hugged her. Nancy Drew never had to put up with this, she thought. The cheek assault never came, though. Disheveled hair and bruised ribs were averted. Amanda stepped back, opening her eyes to a somber Miss Sabine. Dampness glistened under her eyes. Amanda's humiliation was still palpable, but for her lack of compassion, her heart ached for the woman. She could hear a pin drop as she hugged the elderly woman again. I'm sorry, she offered Marie, who could barely glance up at her. Her eyes are gray like her brother's. Amanda realized. I should have noticed. She walked toward the disgruntled grandson, who, despite his scowl, looked contrite. He passed her a handkerchief. I'm sorry, he whispered, as she took the soft white cloth, for your tears. I'm sorry for my idiocy, she replied. Some hours later, as they walked home, Anna whispered, His name is Manaus, she said in Amanda's ear. He's too old for you. He's 16, but he is cute. If you say so. She glared at her sister. But why is his family's vineyard going belly up? And what does it have to do with his mother's death? She wanted to ask, but in light of her recent failure, she knew this wouldn't be the right time. This has been an episode of Hope's Nocturne. Please join us again next Thursday for another excerpt. If, like me, you can't wait to find out what happens next, you can purchase the book very soon, wherever they're sold. If not, please join us again every Thursday for a new episode.